Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Trek the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on volume 25, chapter 5, and things continue to heat up. I will admit, with these two sets of chapters, which should be this entire Mushoku Monday because it's really long. Now, the recording might be short because it's a lot of fighting, but it's always open to, like, what I'm going to actually dig into and what I'm not going to dig into. But I have to admit, there's, like, a bit of this that I'm a little bit disappointed. But at the same time, damn, did it end really good. We're getting some good moments here. I was mentioning it in the chat last week, but I'm getting massive like MC vibes from Kalman III. This guy is literally the MC. This guy is totally the MC. But as per usual, thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Thank you so much for you guys' support, your kind words, all you guys do for me. It means a great deal to me. Without you guys, this entire saga would not be, and it's been an absolute blessing to me. As much as people pop in and say, thank you for doing what you're doing, I'm like, this is me too. Like, this is totally for me too. I really enjoy doing this stuff, and you guys are what makes it so amazing. And yes, what keeps the lights on so this can keep going. Because, you know, kind words are great, but those lights got to stay on. Thank you so much for everybody that support channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. Star Killer with a membership last week. Bulbous with a membership. Noah with a massive super. Like, Noah just pops up out of nowhere and says, hey guys, it's been a while, drop the bomb. Thank you so much, Noah. It means a great deal to me. Mud Mr. Face Pie with a super. Thank you so much. Abraham with a super. Inferno Torch with a super and a gifted membership. Thank you so much, Inferno Torch. It means a great deal to me. Gearless again. Also another one that just comes back out of nowhere, says, hey guys, been a while, drops the bomb. It's like Noah and Gearless just come out of nowhere and say, hey guys, how's it going? Drops the bombs. Thank you so much, Gearless. You're freaking amazing, dude. Nicholas with 51 memberships. Rain the emotes on everybody. Last week's was crazy. If you're not guessing it by now, last week was absolutely crazy. And Royce Moist with a super. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. It means a great deal to me. Like I said before, I cannot express enough. It's your guys' support that keeps the stuff going. And the outpour of support last week just... it got me choked up. I thank you guys so much. You guys are so freaking great. With all that out of the way, with all the mushy stuff out of the way, I did have one thing last week that really jumped my head, and because I'm me, you guys know me by now. For those that know me, my brain went down a massive rabbit hole. Now, when I was talking about Aetoff's arms being on Rudius, I thought that, you know, without the arms, that whole process would have been slowed. But it didn't really click on me when I was actually talking about it at the time that without the arms, he would not even been able to heal himself. He probably would have ended up dying because yes, eventually he does wake up and he uses the arms to cast healing on himself with his incantations. But without the arms, he would not have been able to close his wounds. And so not only the fact that yes, Doga comes in there, you know, picks up his body, takes it to this cave and then, you know, wraps his wounds, he might stop the bleeding, but the assumption is that with the arms on there, it has closed those massive blood gushing wounds with those arteries that are just spraying. But yes, it goes even further in the idea that even if Rudius were to regain consciousness, if he didn't have those arms, he would just be sitting there. He'd be able to roll himself over and get up or whatever. He'd be in a massive amount of pain, but he wouldn't even been able to heal himself. So thus, he would be completely armless. Even if he were to overcome that pain, I don't think he would have been able to help Doga at all getting out there. Again, Doga is able to fight off these things and get him around, but Doga's not going to be able to get a way for him to get back up to the surface. It all kind of lines up to the idea that without those arms, I think Rudius would have died down there. I think he would have bled out and died down there. Even if Doga were to close off the wounds, I think Rudius would get an infection or something like that. If he would have even regained consciousness after a while, he would have bled out. Literally, Aetoff's arms saved his life 100%. Like, there's no, like, other route there. He just would have been dead. But anyways, again, that's where my mind goes. It's like, it dawned on me when I was editing. I'm like, wait, he wouldn't have been able to even heal himself. He would not have been able to heal himself. That was the whole point of cutting his arms off to begin with, dummy. Anyways, that's that aside. Let's move on. Let's move on to even more Aetoff amazingness. Like, I was actually super shocked by what Aetoff finally did when she showed up. I'm like, okay, I wasn't really expecting that because that's really not her nature. Like, what Aetoff does when I'm spoiling things. What Aetoff does when she shows up, I'm like, that's totally not like her. Like, what happened to her? Anyways, Chapter 5, Kalman III versus Kalman II and Company. These titles are just getting so lazy. He was doing this last volume, if I remember correctly. It's like, it's just laying out what happens. Things fought. Chapter 6, people fought. Chapter 7, people talked after the fighting. Ogre God Marta went on a rampage, tearing up tree and earth. He was supposed to be a straightforward monster with brute strength, so Zenoba and Doga should be good fit for fighting him. No one could beat the blessed child Zenoba on strength alone, and Doga did well against aggressive opponents, so Rudeus didn't feel the need to worry, though he didn't have the luxury of worrying about anyone else but himself. In front of him was number 7 of the 7 great powers, North God Kalman III, Alexander Rybak. The MC. Dude's the MC, I'm sorry, he's totally the MC. This was one half of a duo that pushed Rudeus into the ravine. On top of that, Rudeus didn't have version 1 this time, and version 2 was incomplete. He couldn't relax, couldn't hold anything back. Victory would go to whoever moved first, and he'd open with Quagmire. I was waiting. North God Kalman III made them wait. Of course, being a North God warrior, he could just be pretending in order to launch a surprise attack. After placing Quagmire, Rudeus followed up a stone cannon. Before we fight, I want to talk a little. He deflected the stone cannon harmlessly. Or did it go off course? Whichever the case, it changed trajectory mid-air and shot away. Not only that, but despite the Quagmire under his feet, he wasn't sinking. Was this the power of the North God? No. Rudeus knew about the King Dragon Blade's abilities. Yeah, that was a funny thing, because that didn't really kind of dawn on me at that point. Yeah, technically that's probably how he got out of the ravine. I mean, it kind of confirms that in the next chapter as well. It's like, yeah, he probably just used that anti-gravity thing to get up there, which then also, yes, technically plays into what he did with the behemoth. The behemoth, he was zipping and dipping around the damn behemoth is probably because the powers of that blade. He just literally defies the laws of gravity. But like that, Rudeus is like, I'm going to have to get him first. Quagmire, stone cannon. He's just like, stop, I want to talk first. Just go away, you pest. Rudeus is like a little mosquito buzzing around. You have every right to be angry. Someone cut off your arms and threw you into a ravine. I'm sure you're itching to fight. But please, wait a little longer. When I've said my piece, I'm all yours. Even a runt like you surely capable of waiting while 2 great warriors talk. Damn! Did he call me a runt? Rudeus thought. Asshole. I'll send you home in pieces. You are technically a little flea over there, Rudeus. Rudeus would have thought that if he had more flair for the dramatic. But he couldn't muster the anger. From the perspective of one of the 7 great powers, Rudeus was a runt. Honestly, after being boosted so highly lately, this perspective was refreshing, if anything. I love how every now and then Rudeus does that. Like, all the time people do this, and then finally when somebody does this, it actually feels good. Still, Rudeus didn't want to stall for time. He wanted to get back to the others. Stepping back, Rudeus looked to Sander. Like Alexander, he made no move to attack. Rudeus knew that he had no chance of winning this alone. Sorry. Sander shrugged and stepped forward. All right. What is it, stranger? Stranger? You call me your blood a stranger? Isn't it the first time we met? The first time we met was when I came out of Mother's belly, Dad. Rudeus wondered why Sander was playing dumb. Enough of this. I know you. Even underneath that ugly helmet. You are North God Kalman II, Alex Rybak. Alec, you're stepping on my line. I'm supposed to do the introduction. Damn it, you messed it up, boy. They're all about theatrics. This entire family's about theatrics. Sander sighed as he took off his helmet. Alec had the same crop of black hair. The family resemblance was strong. You were supposed to defeat me. Then say, you were a worthy opponent. I would like to at least look upon your face at the end. Then take off the helmet. Forget that. I thought you were dead. What have you been doing? Taking on apprentices and teaching my skills as I pleased. Though not long ago, I was inspired by Her Majesty Queen Ariel of the Osra Kingdom to become a knight. Apprentices? What were you doing taking on apprentices after you surrendered your sword to me and set aside the North God style? Anger flashed in little Alec's eyes. Rudeus didn't know what happened between them, but Sander's words touched a nerve. Alec, I didn't set aside the North God style. Liar, you don't even have a sword now. Sander raised his staff and looked at it. It was made of metal. It was supposed to be ordinary, but maybe it has some special power. It did look ordinary, though. I just think fighting this way makes you stronger. That's idiotic. You want me to believe that old stick is stronger than the King Dragon sword? That's not what I'm saying, Alec. That sword is the strongest in the world. I wielded it for 100 years, so I know better than anyone. Then why? That sword is too strong. Once you got that sword in your hand, nothing stands a chance against you. Not the most enormous beast, the most cunning monster, and the most steadfast warrior. I won battle after battle and became a hero. Only then when I stopped, I had a thought. I was a hero. Wasn't everything the same as before I took up the sword? Was the North God II, Alex Rybak, really strong? Sander cast his eyes downward. Once I had that thought, I could no longer fight as I had. Not to deny my own battles, nor my allies, of course. I realized I was finished as a hero. That's why I surrendered the role of the North God as a hero to you, while I went to spread the teachings of the North God Kalman I. That's interesting. It does kind of put a lot into the things people were saying about Kalman II when he was traveling around. They were mentioning the idea that this guy was like not picking up a sword and stuff like that. He seemed odd. And this technically finally does put a lot of reference to that whole thing. He's basically saying, I picked up that sword. It's freaking OP. That sword is massively OP. It controls gravity. It blows up things around it. It is crazy. That thing is extremely powerful. You got the best sword right there. I gave it to you. You could do these incredible feats. I did. I picked up that sword and I did incredible things. I defeated anything in front of me. It is the most OP weapon. But it's just like when you start a JRPG and you put in some, Game Shark codes, some kind of hack in there, use some sort of tool or whatever to boost up your character to give them like an OP weapon, even though they're level 1. And so they have this massively OP weapon that literally does 99999 damage every time you swing, but your character's level 1. And you literally just breeze through the entire game because you one-shot everything. But then you look back and you realize it's just because I one-shot everything because I had a massively OP sword. My character itself didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Everything was the same. I think that's kind of what it's saying there. Was everything the same as before I'd taken up the sword? Was me, myself, the same? I was a hero. I used this sword. It was super OP. But when I look back at myself, I was the same person I was before. Was Alex Rybak really strong? No, the sword's strong. And there is an element of that almost feeling that way as this fight progresses. It almost feels like this dude's just using a cheat code. He's not that powerful. He's actually really, not that skilled. This boy isn't that skilled. He just got a really nice toy. He's literally a kid throwing a tantrum because he has this really OP sword and he's got a toy that he can use. He's not that great. He figured that out and says, I can't do this no more. He gave up the sword. He gave it to his son. Here, have it. You be hero now. Here, have it. Go be hero boy. Here, you can have it. I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to start teaching the teachings of Kalman I. I'm going to go do this thing. And what weapon does he pick up after he puts down that sword? The most OP weapon ever. What does he pick up to replace it? Just a pole. Just a staff. Even Maria says this thing's ordinary. And it gives no indication as they're fighting up here in a minute that this staff does anything. It literally almost feels like it is legit just a pole. It's not anything special. It's not magical. It's just made of metal. He wanted to go to hard mode. He literally gave up the most OP weapon in the game, and he picked up the most weakest weapon in the game. He just goes to the starting zone and asks for a broomstick, and he's just going to swing that. He's going to hard mode now. It's super interesting. It definitely does answer a lot of those questions. And it's so interesting, the idea that with Alexander, he wants to be this amazing person just like his father was. But again, he's never understood the real reasoning behind being a hero. What makes a hero? And it gets more on that in a minute, so I don't want to start into that stuff now. Riz couldn't help but feel left out. He wasn't really following, but it seemed like Alexander, the dad, had gotten tired of fighting. Relinquished, I don't think he had really mentioned that. He got tired of being this OP person with his OP blade. He wasn't growing. He wasn't strong. It wasn't his power. He relinquished his symbolic sword, gone to spread his school of fighting. His kid, Alexander, was mad about that. Reese couldn't blame the kid entirely. He'd be pissed off if his dad dumped something so heavy on him and walked out. Child abandonment. Pretty uncool. Yeah, I mean, you can't doubt the fact that this dude just disappears, but was he even there to begin with? As an indication, he just had the child, and then he just kind of went out and became a hero, and then came back and was like, here, have the sword, kid. Peace out again. But I don't really necessarily see this family being I don't see this group, this breed, I guess you could say, them being so fond of family. Nothing indicates me these people are having dinner together. This isn't coming together to have Thanksgiving dinner. So that's how we ended up with Auber. With the eccentrics. What? That was one of the past showed to us by North God Kalman I. I don't recognize the legitimacy of the eccentrics. That isn't the North God style. Alexander shook his head with undisguised disdain. To Rudius, Auber wasn't much of a swordsman, more a ninja. It's not even a fighting style, is it? The first North God Kalman wielded a sword, but he taught. that one need not rely only on the sword. What? That's why you're using that old stick? Yeah. With this, I can feel myself getting stronger. Knowing one is growing makes one stronger still. I don't get it. Interesting they're getting into this, and I kind of wish that we can kind of get a little bit more, and maybe in the coming chapters we'll get into it more. But yeah, like getting into North God Kalman I and what he was really teaching there. Don't rely on just the weapon. Don't rely on just that. And it fits so well with the North God style. And yes, right here we're finally getting an indication that, yes, this is why there's really weird people in the North God style. It's Auber. It's these individuals that are just kind of eccentric and weird. The Peacock Blade. These weird people. And yes, Rudius has always kind of seen them as kind of being like ninjas. Which, yes, kind of does kind of lead into kind of questioning who North God Kalman I was. And this idea that he did have this concept of ninjas and whatnot. But it really kind of, to boil it down is, yes, this is confirming this idea that with his teaching, that original teaching, apparently he didn't want to rely on just the weapon. It was about tricks, whatever you can to win, doing these other things. Yes, and that could be in a thing that where it's not really necessarily how like Auber fought is how North God Kalman I fought, but it is the idea that almost bred this idea of thinking outside of the box with other methods besides just your blade was through this teaching. And it seems like this is something that North God Kalman II has sort of instilled upon people from North God Kalman I to teach people how to use other methods. And it has created what they're calling here is the eccentrics, which would be the Aubers and whatnot, which is interesting. This is getting into what we've always seen in this series as what the North God style is, which is trickery and different methods, is actually something that was created by this core concept that North God Kalman II was trying to instill upon people from his father. It's a really cool idea here. And again, it seems like Kalman III doesn't like this. You created the eccentrics, these things that I don't see as swordsmen. I want to go back to what I think North God style is, which is brute strength and this big old blade. No, that's not what Kalman I wanted. It's interesting, very interesting. And it's interesting because it's almost like Alex actually started this. Kalman II started this. And now I'm actually curious at this point if possibly Kalman I had this blade. I don't think they've yet really indicated who got this blade, who started with this blade. The assumption is that Kalman I had this blade, and that's probably how he did all the feats that he did, and then passed that on to Kalman II, and then Kalman II just basically did exactly what Kalman III is doing right now. He had that blade, made him massively OP, did a whole bunch of crazy feats, and then realized, okay, this blade is wrong. So Kalman I had the blade, did incredible feats, but probably didn't rely on it fully. And then he passed it on to Kalman II. Kalman II used it, and it made him incredibly strong, and he was doing amazing feats, but then realized he's relying on it too much and stepped away, handed off to Kalman III. Kalman III is doing exactly what Kalman II did. It's just now Kalman II has to tell Kalman III, don't do what I did, chill out, don't rely on its strength. Kalman I never wanted that, and I figured that out. Now it's time for you to figure that out. It's very interesting. It's just basically passing on this cursed blade, basically, that becomes their own, all their strength. Anyways, too much talking about that. I love it. I love this stuff. Alex was still young. Once he decided something was one way, he couldn't see differently. Now, Alec, it's my turn to ask you, what are you doing here? I came to defeat Orsted. I'm going to defeat the Dragon God and become number 2 of the 7 great powers. Aiming high, eh? Makes a father proud. Sanders smiled. It made Rudius wonder if he was supposed to be on his side. Don't encourage him. Shut up, dude. Well, I'll be fighting against you this time, but I suppose you're going to strike me down to challenge Orsted. Naturally, I don't care if you're my opponent. I will make the name of the North God Kalman III one that I don't have to be ashamed of. That's not all. I will wipe out the superb devils from existence. Interesting right there. He really does feel like his name is sort of a negative thing. I'm going to make Kalman III a title that I don't have to be ashamed of. I'll never be as good as the first. I'll never be as good as the second. I think that's what's happening here. He's living in a shadow. I think that we're sort of playing out here is that this guy is living in a shadow. This snotty little kid, this immature snotty little kid is living in a shadow. Just like Norn. He's just like Nornal. Don't worry, Alec. You could be Alec Nornal. Huh? The Superd aren't devils. You saw them when you came to the village, didn't you? That's not important. Everyone thinks the Superd are devils. If I kill them all, I'll be remembered as a hero for all eternity. Ugh. And this is kind of going against my hope. For those that missed the Mushoku Monday that we talked about the whole like tour guide into the superb village, as I was like, now that I know that these two individuals are who they are, there was a hope that I had of like, I wonder if possibly he'll see this and go, oh, so they're not evil. No, he don't care. Again, this goes back to what I said originally when we first introduced this dude. This dude only worries about becoming a hero. And they kept pointing out in that chapter, that initial chapter when we first met him, it was pointing out the fact this guy is just taking out this behemoth because he wants to be great. He's not saving the village. He's doing everything wrong. He thinks you become a hero by doing incredible feats. That just makes you a powerful person. It doesn't make you incredible. Orsted can do amazingly OP things. Guess what? Orsted's not a hero. He's not a hero to the public's eye because he's just really powerful. He's feared. That's it. He's not a hero. A hero requires stories and feats that you do that are heroic. You're missing the heroic part of hero. That's not what a hero would do. It isn't, is it? If I get picky about methods, I'll never surpass your great deeds. My name will never outshine that of North God Kalman II. So outshining me is the same as becoming a hero? Exactly. Sander turned to Rudius, mouth half open. He then bowed. I'm terribly sorry, Master Rudius. I thought I could convince my idiot son. It turns out that he's even more of an idiot than I thought. It does look that way. Alec, it seemed, was a slave to the word hero. Rather than become a hero through heroic deeds, he just wanted to become famous so everyone would make a fuss over him. Anyone with half a brain would point out that's not how it works. Rudius didn't know the details of how it works, but this wasn't it. Yeah. They're, again, Aetoff. Need I say more? We don't have to get into depth talk here. Aetoff. A spawn of Aetoff. Let's stop him. Yeah. Sandor donned his helmet and raised his staff. Behind him, Rudius spread his arms to provide backup. Alec glared at them, still grumpy. First, he had his choices disapproved of. Then he had been a subject of exasperated scorn. He was seething with anger and had no way to let it out. You think you could defeat me with that old stick and a deadweight amateur? When I wield the King Dragon Blade? Of course I do. I'm going to put you in your place. Alex snapped at those words. You're dead. Thus the battle between Kalman II and Kalman III began. I like how it says that and not a battle between Kalman III and Kalman II and Rudius. It's just like between them two. Rudius is over here. Alex attacked first, slashing downward, diagonal, at Sander. He wielded the huge sword effortlessly in one hand. Yeah. Whoa. Sander parried its devastating mass with his staff, sending Alec off balance. Yet his defenses didn't drop. He twisted around and came at Sander again. Sander reacted, like he'd seen it coming, and parried his hurricane-like spin. Sander used the principle of leverage to sweep his legs out from underneath him. Still, he didn't hit the ground. He leapt through the air over Sander, then plunged down to attack the ground with impossible speed. It was insane, but Rudius knew the power of the magic sword. King Dragon Blade, Kajakut gravity manipulation. Grah! Sander was ready for it. With his back still to Alec, he parried the King Dragon Blade. Then another, and another. He turned a little each time until he was facing Alec. Alec's blows weren't easy to parry. Every time he kicked off, he left an indent on the ground. The shockwave, when he swung his sword, struck trees, sending them toppling to the ground. The vacuum wave generated was strong enough to bite Rudius' cheeks. The blow didn't hit Sander. The guy might have been retired, but he was still a North God. He went on parrying the strikes without looking worried. With his ability to manipulate gravity, Alec could move freely as he liked, which made it impossible to predict. Sander was keeping up with him all the same. While it didn't seem like he was moving, his body was almost quivering as he made minute adjustments to get into a more advantageous position. This was what a fight between North Gods looked like. They weren't that fast. Maybe because of the training that Rudius did with Edis and Orsted, Rudius was reading their movements. However, they were so tightly packed and unpredictable, Rudius couldn't help. Take that! Whoa! Yeah, this is interesting because I really do question still at this point who is really the one that's in the seven great powers. Rudius said at some point, specifically, last chapter, the previous chapters, specifically, that North God Kalman II did achievements that placed him in the seven great powers. So, we're confirming there, he placed in there. The assumption, because they keep pointing out that Kalman III is part of that now, that he gave up that title by giving up his sword and his position and retiring. that at that point, Kalman III took over that position. But I wonder if that's just the assumption that he took over. I mean, there is a question mark here. Is the 7 great powers based on skill and power alone of the individual, or can weapons offset that? Because I truly believe if Kalman II does not have that sword, he's nothing. But there's also the claim here that the only reason that he's something, the only reason that he's in the 7 great powers, because he's so actually weak and talentless, that the sword is what's putting him in that position. So I'm kind of curious now if the 7 great powers is based off of actual strength alone of the person, or can it be adjusted just by having a really powerful weapon? Because I would argue that if it is by strength alone of the person, Kalman II is probably still on that list, and they assume that Kalman III took it over. Rudeus steadied his breath, then looked hard at the two of them. If they were evenly matched, intervention could swing the battle. Even with the demon eye of foresight, reading their movements was no easy task. Even if he couldn't read Alec, Rudeus knew how Sander moved. At the very least, he was also easier to predict than Alec. He had a pattern. He's trained, whereas Alec's just thrashing. I think that's what it's kind of pointing out there. This dude's just thrashing, which is funny to somebody that claims that these others are eccentrics because they do tricks and they don't have patterns. They're not skilled swordsmen that have a method and trained way of fighting. There, Rudeus fired a stone cannon. It went in a straight line into Alec, but no, it wasn't straight. It wasn't a direct hit. Its path warped, even as it left an indent in Alec's armor. It slid off the surface and disappeared in the forest. It did throw Alec off balance, though. Interesting. This is like the first time I think I've ever kind of noted that Rudeus did not call out his ability. Again, he typically does call out his attacks in order to help those that are fighting on the front line. Like, he's not even calling it out for Sander. Ha! Sander didn't miss the opening. His blow slammed into Alex's solar plexus. Alex let out a grunt, then leapt at Rudeus. He was fast. Butt out, runt! He stepped in sharply, slashing down in a diagonal. Rudeus used his eye of foresight and took the blow with his remaining gauntlet. The moment it hit, a crushing weight pressed down on Rudeus' legs. The gauntlet cracked, and he sank to his knees. Rudeus thought his left hand was going to come flying off. But then, with grinding noise, the black arm parried the sword. The Aetoff hand was sturdy. That arm! No way! Is that Grandma's? Electric. Rudeus released mana he stored in his other hand. Alec's body was bathed in purple lightning. Rudeus poured mana into his left and prepared a point-blank stone cannon. Rock! Alec didn't stop, curving his back like a shrimp to dodge the stone cannon. He spun on one foot and slashed at Rudeus' leg. Rudeus jumped out of the way, but Alec had already regained footing, sending his blade straight for Rudeus' neck. Yeah! At the last second, Sander came charging in at Alex's one side, ramming into him with his staff. Alec went flying straight off into a tailspin to the side and came back to Earth in a gentle arc that ignored the laws of gravity. Humph. At a glance, he didn't seem to have taken any damage or was bothered by the electric. Was it the power of the sword? His armor? Body? Was he being stoic? Anything was possible. Yeah, I don't imagine it's his armor, because a lot of indication that that armor is really strong. They point out several times with at least Aetoff's men. They have some incredibly magic-resistant armor, and so he's probably wearing some of it. Looks like I held back too much. Guess it's time to get a little more serious. This wasn't a bad situation. If they kept up, they had a chance at winning. Sander would be the frontliner, with Rudeus supporting. If they each landed a hit every time, eventually they'd bring down Alec. North God Kalman III was a tough opponent, but Sander was strong too. They were evenly matched. Rudeus was the deciding factor. Yeah, again, I would argue Kalman III is not powerful. It's just his sword is freaking OP, and his armor. He's got the OP equipment. I think if he didn't have that sword, his father would wipe the floor with him. Rudeus? This is bad. Rudeus was shocked. They had the advantage, and Rudeus hadn't taken any damage. That last exchange of blows had broken his gauntlet. But the Aetoff hand had better specs. He's holding his power in reserve for his fight with Orsted later. He's going to get stronger and stronger. How much longer will Miss Roxy be? I don't know. She was supposed to send word when she was ready. It had already been half a day, so Rudeus thought that she'd be good to go soon. Unless Edis or Zenoba had gone down, and they steamrolled Roxy too. He's much stronger than he was when I knew him. I may have promised a little more than I can deliver. Let's buy some time for now. Right. Sander charged forward, and Alec ran once more to meet him. They got stuck into another exchange of blows. It was just as Sander said. He was no longer deflecting Alec's blows perfectly. With every parry, his stance degraded further. The level of Alec's attacks had changed. They looked the same, but possibly more weight was behind them. If he got the advantage over Sander, Rudeus wouldn't be able to squeeze in any more direct hits with his stone cannon. Rudeus stopped shooting. Instead, used magic to shape the earth. First of all, he put a stop to the bouncy, physics-defying aerial maneuvers. That would take pressure off for Sander and give more flexibility for how he attacked. Next, Ruiz introduced his stone cannons. Earth Lance. He raised pillars of earth to surround them. Earth Net. About 50 centimeters above Sander's head, he formed a net of earth. If he blocked off the space above them, those gravity-defying leaps would... You pest! One hit and the net was down. That was a no-go. Yeah, I'm not sure what he was expecting of that whole thing. What's the matter, Dad? Is that all you got? Sander was back to a corner. It wasn't a difference in skill. Without a doubt, it was a difference in weapons. Every blow from the King Dragon blade bent Sander's staff further. Ruiz was frantically shooting stone cannons to back him up, but they were all thrown off course. He seemed to have decided to leave Rudius for later, as he was ignoring his attacks. Suddenly, a shadow came hurling at Alec from the side like a comet. A red-haired woman, with a sword in each hand, threw herself at Alec with all of her strength. Alec stopped that attack, but ate another from Sander, who was thrown back. The red swordsman followed, striking again. Alec made another landing that spat in the face of gravity, then lashed out with his giant blade. The red swordswoman couldn't respawn in time. Behind her, following like a shadow, a green-haired warrior diverted the strike. The mad dog howled, still flashed, running right at Alec's throat. But something invisible turned it to the side. The blade dug into his shoulder, but his armor was unexpectedly sturdy and stopped the blow, leaving only a scratch. Noticing this, the mad dog jumped back and didn't chase. The great sword swept across where she stood, slicing a few strands of her hair. Sorry for the wait, Rudius. Edis casted a quick look at Rudius. Regier didn't turn around, but he was probably using his third eye to check to make sure he was okay. They'd come to help. If Rudius was a maiden, you're a princess. It's Rudius princess mode again. He'd have been in love at first sight. He wanted them to hold him, ravish him. Very, very interesting. I love this, them showing up out of nowhere. It just doesn't feel like much time passed. But again, if you think about it, when we covered the whole chapter with Galfalion, he ran off, went into an open field, Edis came up there, they exchanged a couple lines with each other, and then it was on. Slowly, bam, bam, dead. Then they had the parting words, she set him on fire and left. So literally that whole segment there is pretty in line with this long conversation the two of them have, and them exchanging blows over and over again, having that brief moment of Rudius and Sander talking, and then going at it again. It's about the same amount of time right there. It's very interesting. But yeah, this is where at this point, I'm kind of in my mind going, damn, I was so hyped for Kalman II. I was really hyped to see Sander in action. And unfortunately, at least for now, I mean, they might have him fight again later on. Like, all this stuff kind of unfolds. I'm like, wow, this is a lot less spectacular. There's like a little bit of letdown. I'm sorry. Like, again, I do acknowledge that this dude has the strongest blade in the world. Now, I don't know if eventually we will have it compared to Orsted's blade, but at least it implies that, putting that aside, this is the strongest blade ever. This thing literally makes you OP. But still, it's like, there's still a skill difference here. There's still a massive skill difference here. And it sucks that that's enough that pretty much makes Sander's first showing be pretty lackluster. It sucks. To put him up against something so powerful, we don't get that cool. But argument can be made. The fact that right here, he's pretty much soloing this guy with his blade. And as we go forward, we're going to see that even with like 3 plus Rudius on top of him is still not enough to beat him. It shows how freaking powerful Sander is to have lasted this long solo. And he does fight him again later on too. So it's kind of like a mixture. Like, I'm a little bit let down, but at the same time, I do acknowledge that dude was soloing this guy for a while. Oh, come on. You can't mean Galfalion's dead. Rudius looked to Reserd, who gave a nod. It had been 2-on-1. But Edis and Reserd took down the Sword God. I knew he stepped down as a Sword God, but I didn't think he'd go down that easy. I suppose I overestimated him. I didn't know him long, but he was a good man. Alex's demeanor had changed. All sense of easy confidence had evaporated. I thought he wiped the floor with the likes of you two. We were going to fight Orsted together. Alec gripped his sword and dropped low into his stance. Something was coming, sensing an overwhelming aura rolling off of him. Edis and Reserd prepared and lowered their stances. If he was getting serious now, then it was too late. Edis and Reserd had joined Rudius and Sander. It was 4-on-1, even if one in the equation was one of the 7 great powers, equipped with the world's strongest sword. Again, that's the whole point. In my right hand, a sword. Alec raised the point of his sword, held in his right hand up into the sky. In my left hand, a sword. He gripped the hilt with his left hand. Two-handed grip. Was this his true fighting style then? We're finished. Flee. Sander dived to one side, but it was too late. With these, mine arms, countless lives shall I claim. 100 million deaths I will deliver. Alec raised the King Dragon blade high above his head. My name is North God, Alexander Rybak. Ruius realized he, along with everyone else, was floating, hovering in the air. All the fallen leaves and branches as well. This was the King Dragon Blade's gravity manipulation. They didn't fall, and they didn't climb any higher. Ruius flailed his arms and legs. He couldn't retreat. As he hung there, totally defenseless, Ruius could see power crackling from every fiber of Alec's body. I avenged my friend and ally. Just then, Ruius' body started to move on his own accord. He concentrated mana into both of his hands and released a sonic wave. He sent Edis, Rijerd, and Sander flying away. After that, he pulled fragments of his Zelef gauntlet back to him, then pointed the tip of the stone of absorption at Alec. Whatever was in the space between him and the sword disappeared, and Ruius fell back to earth. He then threw the stone of absorption aside, and then drove all of his mana into his arms, pointing them at Alec, who was ready to swing his great blade down. Secret technique, gravity fracture. There was an explosion and a flash. Ruius lost consciousness. I'm assuming gravity... This is another... Here we go again. Here we go again. Here we go again. We're doing this again. I'm assuming gravity fracture was Alexander. Because again, the blade itself is gravity manipulating. I don't know that they've ever indicated up to this point that Ruius has mastered gravity magic. I know his older self had. Oldius had at some point mastered gravity magic. No indication has given that Ruius has used gravity magic. But again, we're running that situation where it doesn't want to tell you who says what. Ruius was preparing something. We just don't know what he was preparing to use. Yeah, it has to be, because Ruius literally just turned his hands towards him, and it pretty much cuts off his explanation of what he's going to do. So it makes sense that this secret technique, gravity fracture, is going to be Alexander. But yeah, this dude has freaking main characters. This dude is literally the main character. He's like, I'm going to avenge my friend, massive Excalibur. He literally does like a freaking Excalibur. He doesn't have a saber face, though. He doesn't have the saber face to go with this. He definitely looks like he's straight out of Fate Stay Night, though. He's got the whole spiky hair crap going on. The crazy little bit here. Again, having a sense of expectations for Galfalion, and then realizing that he's overestimated him, and at this point pretty much pulling out all the stops. Something that he was keeping for probably Orsted at this point. And now, again, I'm going to avenge my friend. You don't care. He's not your friend and ally. Again, it's literally like he's just this main character that has to, avenge his friend for the sake of justice. Such a main character. Quick thinking by Ruius, though. Very quickly blowing everybody away and then switching to do the stun of absorption. I am curious about the statement. Again, he goes to do two-handed grip, which apparently is required in order to unleash this technique. Immediately, Sander recognizes what he's doing, tells him to get the hell out. It's too late, gets sucked up. So it basically puts you in a state of vulnerability, and the idea that you can't move around. It's put you in the air. It's gotten rid of the gravity. Now you're stuck in the air. And at which point he's going to do the strike. But he says, with these, mine arms, countless lives shall I claim. 100 million deaths I will deliver. I'm curious if that is an incantation for the blade itself, or if this is something that he's made up himself because, again, he's got the main character syndrome. I'm curious if this is an incantation for the blade itself that possibly North God Kalman I had made. 100 million deaths I will deliver. That's a crap ton of people. That's a war. That's lives in a war. I'm curious if there is meaning behind that. But that all said, it is curious that he was actually going to wait to fight Orsted with Galfalion. We were going to fight Orsted together. I wonder if that's just an acceptance there, or if he does kind of fear the idea of fighting Orsted alone. I mean, he's still going to go after it, but again, that's all in the idea that he's stuck on the idea that he has to do that to be something. But it is curious that he is allowing himself to fight alongside Galfalion up until this point. Anyways, when Ruius woke up, he was on top of a tree. He'd been sent flying, which he knew because his armored leg was broken. The leg segment was smashed into pieces, and his leg was bent in a weird angle. His legs weren't the only casualties. His chassis had been smashed into fragments too. There was an intermittent pain in his chest. Ribs probably broken. He coughed, and pain flared up his chest. But he could still talk. Right away, he cast healing magic. How far was I? Whoa. Trying to get up, the branches below him broke, and he tumbled down through more branches. He must have been high up, as he didn't hit the ground. He saw a crater about 20 meters across, right next to the ravine. He hadn't been there before, probably made by the attack just now. Holy hell! Looking around, over in the direction of the superb village, he's seen something shining. He knew that light. Roxy! Is that? Whoa! Another branch snapped, banging the branches as he fell. He hit the ground. He cast healing magic again. Whatever was going on, he needed a handle on the situation. Where was everyone? As he stood, he was shocked by someone standing in front of him. Sander, if it isn't Master Rudius, could I trouble you for another healing spell? He was covered in wounds, armor in ruins, helmet shattered, blood trickled down from his head, and his left arm dangled limp. Yes, of course. Much appreciated. What about Edison Reserve? Minor injuries. It was a good thing you allowed them to get some distance. They should be fine, even without healing magic. They're still unconscious over that way. What about North God Kalman III? After he saw we were down, he went on ahead. He didn't try to finish us off. That last technique of his was the strongest of the North God style. Again, I'm thinking that was it. That gravity fracture is apparently North God style. He probably assumed he didn't have to. First, pushing him into the ravine, and now this. The kids seemed to have a few cards short of a full deck. That had saved their skin. But even so, they let him get by them. He was heading for Orsted. Orsted would probably win between them. Technically, he was supposed to have fought Alexander and the King Dragon Blade in all the loops up until now. New info? There's another just random info drop. Oh, by the way, they fight every freaking loop with the blade. Now, here's the curious thing. It says technically, Orsted was supposed to have fought Alexander and the King Dragon Blade in all the loops until now. Alexander and the King Dragon Blade. That kind of makes me wonder, does this sort of kind of hint at the idea that he always fights Alexander who has the blade? Does he fight Alexander every loop, or somebody with the King Dragon Blade every loop? It doesn't really matter either way, but it is kind of curious that yes, every loop, in all the loops, he will fight Alexander. That's the curious thing. And he beats the fire out of him. Of course. In the plan, he wouldn't go out of his way to fight unless he had to. But if he did, Rudius was sure that he'd crush him without breaking a sweat, just like with the Water God Rada. That's the whole idea that yes, technically no matter what, he's going to have to use mana to do it. Like even with Rada, I believe right there he is expending mana because he is blocking, he's using techniques of the Water God style and blocking as he goes in there and then kills her. But it is kind of curious about how much would he use. The last technique gave Rudius pause, though. Orsted wasn't the only one in Superb Village. There was Superb, who'd only just recovered, as well as Julie and Norn. If Orsted had to block or deflect the attack on someone else's behalf, it would take a considerable amount of mana, even for him. Fighting a battle on the defensive was more difficult than the offensive. If Orsted couldn't protect everyone, they'd all die. Yeah, and I think this is a true statement here. I think he would protect them. He knows how important those people are to Rudius, and yes, you technically do have Reserve. Can you fight, Sander? You're going? This isn't over yet. I saw a light in the forest just now. The light of summoning. If Roxy's got everything ready, we're just getting started. Two green-haired men came running out of the forest. They were both superb warrior, but neither was Reserve. When they spotted Rudius, they ran his way. It was... I can see them like, okay, she's ready. Time to go over tell Rudius. And they're like, he's over this way. Let's go over this way. And all of a sudden, kapoof. Let's go this way. They were like running over there, and then suddenly the gravity explosion thing happens, and God damn it, let's go over this way. He's over this way. Anyway, sorry. Just a mental image popped in my head. We have a message from Roxy. The summoning worked. All right, the superb nodded. Right, I'll dive him first. I'll slow him down some. Don't push yourself too hard. I won't. After a brief exchange, Sander set off running. You take care of Edison Reserve. When they wake up, tell them to come and back us up. Understood. The superb acknowledged. Please, show me the way. Rudius followed the superb warrior to find Roxy. They went there directly, jumping over tree roots and plunging through the undergrowth. With some magic armor broken, Rudius couldn't move fast. Being as it wasn't functioning, it was heavy. Along the way, he pulled off the updated version 2, so he can run unencumbered. North God Kalman III was stronger than he thought. He couldn't back down now, not when the real fight was only just beginning. Rudius! Reaching their destination, Roxy wasn't there. Only superb warrior and Elise. That meant it was all according to plan. You look terrible. Despite patching himself up, his armor and clothes were in tatters. When Elise seen him, her eyes went wide, but her face smoothed back to neutral in seconds. It's ready. Behind her, crudely and quickly sketched a magic circle. It had already stopped glowing. This was the same circle that had been on the scrolls, rendered useless at the bottom of the ravine. The scroll's maker was Roxy Greyrat. The circle was broken, crushed underneath the weight of a massive set of armor. The magic armor. The duplicate magic armor they'd made. As they'd predicted, there was a chance that it might get destroyed in a fight. This is the set they had to leave at the workshop. because there was no room in the office armory. It was the one trump card that had to escape the destruction of the office. The magic armor, version 1. All right, time for round 2. So they played in that whole theory there, because yes, my original thought process here was that he was keeping one of the armors, the version 1, inside there on top of a scroll, and then whenever he deployed it from his scrolls, it would summon it. But no, this is implying that it's not at the office, which is weird. Like, you have a basement full of, like, what seems like just tens upon tens, if not 100 different teleportation circles down there to go to different places across the world. But no, we don't have any room to put a freaking mecha suit. Like, what? But yeah, my thought process there was that, yes, maybe the ogre went down there and destroyed all the teleportation circles, but maybe just kind of slammed the armor off to the side, destroyed the circle, and then left. Like, it's not going to sit there and start pounding into this armor just to destroy it. It's just going to destroy the teleportation circle and leave. Doesn't even probably even know what the hell it is. And so the whole process here was just going to be, yes, they're just going to have to restore the circle, or again, possibly go there and create a circle on the other side to replace it so that he can now summon it. But here it's implying that no, it just didn't fit in the office, so we left it in the workshop instead and put the circle there, and she just had to basically recreate the scroll that was on his suit, the scroll that was destroyed in the ravine. So she had to literally, by memory, recreate this scroll, which honestly is pretty crazy if you think about it. She has to recreate this, because again, what they implied is that with each one of these circles, he's creating the circle and then having to make a duplicate of it so that he knows what he has to make on the other side. And so she's going to have to go by memory what was on the one that's underneath the armor back at the workshop, which is pretty dang crazy if you think about it. Or she probably did a lot of process of elimination of going, okay, was this it? Was this it? No, it didn't work. Is this it? No, it didn't work. I would think he would have to do it probably pretty quickly, because that would be a lot of mana to expend to failures, but still pretty much in line with what I was thinking, is that she was probably going to figure out how to bring the armor over. It's just odd that, again, that it was at the workshop and not at the office. With how important the armor is, I don't think that they would be left to the idea of, oh, we don't have any space for it. Now, here is the weird statement. This is the weird statement here. The magic armor, the duplicate magic armor they'd made, as they predicted, there was a chance that it might get destroyed in the fight. This is why they had to leave it at the workshop, because they had no room at the office armory. And then he says the magic armor version 1. What is the magic armor version 1? It's the first armor that Rudius made. The big one, the one that takes a crap ton of mana. But back here, the duplicate magic armor they'd made. This is implying that they had made a second version 1. Now, that does technically make sense because, yes, you have version 1, which was the original mecha suit that Rudius made to go fight Orsted, but it took too much mana. Then they created version 2, which was the smaller one that he can wear under his robes that is not as powerful, but it's something he can move around in and doesn't waste all of his mana and deplete him so quickly. But he always has to go back to version 1 whenever there's something very, very difficult going on. He wanted to use it for the Death God, couldn't really pull it off. He got to use it against Aetoff, and she quickly gave up. He used it against that group of idol fans back at Millis. But at some point, they were talking about the idea of trying to improve the system and make it more efficient and make it stronger. Roxy was looking into improving this stuff as a way that she can help Rudius out. And she went into researching the magic circles and working with Zenova and them to try to improve it. What this makes me believe is right here, he's saying they made a second version 1, and there's going to be possibly some improvements to it. He never indicates anything as we go ahead here that anything's been improved. He says at some point that his field of view is better, which can just basically mean the idea that now that I'm in the suit, I'm up higher and my vantage point is higher and I can see more. But it could play to the idea that him having a better field of view in this new set of armor. But again, it says this is a duplicate. This makes me believe there's a version 1 that was at the office, and then they had a duplicate that we're making over here, maybe with improvements, that he now has summoned right here. But he still calls it version 1. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. Chapter 6. Kalman III versus Dedo Indo and Company. Again, these titles. These titles are so freaking boring now. Just who's fighting? That is the title. Chapter 6. They fought again. Chapter 7. Another fight. Reyes booted up version 1, then went after the North God. As he ran, he dug deep for all the magic left in his body. He consumed a decent portion in the fight with the North God, but at that level, he shouldn't have even used 10%. He had magic to spare. Yeah, this right here, I'm already getting a little bit anxious, as Reyes is now using version 1, charging off the battle against North God, that I'm like, you still gotta fight Bodyguardi in the suit. What are we doing? But God, this chapter ends so freaking great. I love the ending of this chapter. A lot of this chapter, I will admit, this particular chapter, a lot of it is just a bunch of, I need to do something, 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 which is really kind of obnoxious. But the ending's great. Only since earlier, the thundering that had gone on without a break had stopped. No matter how well matched Zenoba and Doga were fighting him, maybe downing a god-tier opponent was out of the question. Rudius hoped that they were okay. But if they weren't, they'd have both the North God and the Ogre God to deal with. Would his magic hold out? Or would it cut out part way, like his fight with Orsted? He had to stop worrying about what came next. Focus on what was in front of him. First, his number one goal, North God Kalman III. Arriving, Sander had already lost. He was on his butt with his back against a tree, limp, face down. There was no weapon in his hand, staff bent, lying nearby. Alexander looked down at him, conquering his predecessor. How long are you going to keep playing this game, Dad? You know by now, don't you? You don't have a hope in beating me, not without a magic sword-class weapon. Or is this another strategy? Playing dead. The eccentrics are all good at that, aren't they? Doing whatever it takes to win and achieve their goal. I admire that approach. Though if I'm honest, I think Auber and the others went too far. You taught them that, Dad. Why do you reject me? Sander didn't reply. He just sat there in silence. Hopefully he wasn't dead. Well, it's about time I was going. Alec turned to Rudius. What? It's like turns around to that. It's like, it just turns around to that. Like, what the hell is this? He looked like he'd seen a bear or something. Rudius imagined he was probably not expecting this encounter. Probably wondering why this guy was here. Assuming that armor was broken. Listen here, my son, and I'll answer that for you. Alex stood there frozen. Sander stood up. Playtime is over. You're right. Without a magic sword, I can't defeat you. That's why I borrowed one from Edis. Only, it really is bare minimum. With just a magic sword, I wouldn't have much chance. So I waited. I held on, playing dead and waited, so that I could be sure of victory. Sander drew his sword from behind him. It was Edis' second sword, the magic sword Eminence. You want to know why I refuse to accept you? You want to be a hero. But in that pursuit, you sully yourself with deeds unworthy of heroism. If you want to be a hero, act like it. Don't steal victory through underhanded tactics. Don't buy fame by beating down the weak. Finding an opponent greater than yourself, against whom you have no chance of success, challenge them, win, and claim your victory. Not as I did, but as the first North God Kalman did. Interesting. He's literally like, look to my dad. Look to your grandfather. Don't do like I did. Again, he is pointing out that he used that sword incorrectly. He did just like his son's doing right now. I used that sword, and I defeated great things. Don't look to me for somebody to go by. Look to Kalman I. But yeah, again, trying to drill it into this boy's head. You're doing things that are not worthy of heroism. Act like a hero if you want to be one. Don't use underhanded tactics. Don't beat down the weak. You're about to go off to kill a bunch of superbs because people think they're bad. That's not heroism, doofus. Sander drew his sword from the scabbard with an air of lofty detachment and held it ready. The magic sword, Eminence, was short. Wielding it, Sander looked befitting of the name of the North God. Meanwhile, Alec shot a glance back over his shoulder. So that's it. You were waiting for backup. Geese did tell me not to let Rudius get into magic armor. All he meant was not to let the opponent get into peak condition. You seriously can't think that you win. Just the two of you against me and the King Dragon Blade. Who said there was two of us? From the bushes behind him stepped out Edis and Rejerd. Dedo Indo, ready. They must have regained consciousness as Rudius got his armor. They still had some injuries, but both were tougher than Rudius. Their injuries wouldn't hinder them in a fight. Yeah, it was about this point where I did really it dawned on me again of like, yeah, again, Rejerd just literally got over this plague, dude. He just got over this plague. The look Aetoff gave Rudius was strong and loaded with meaning. It said that she trusted him to have her back. Rizard also gave the same look. Rizard hadn't seen the magic armor before, but his third eye must have shown him who he was. He trusted him to support him, and he'd do just that. All three of them, including Sander. After all this effort to bring version 1, all he was going to do was support. It made him feel a bit pathetic. He's a big old mecha suit. I got you on support. Peep. Peep. Then again, this was how they had done things since way back. Aetoff in front, Rizard controlled, and Rudius ran support. They didn't need to discuss it. They had one extra in the mix, but they had a kick-ass lineup. It's like Dedo Endo +1. Bring it. At Sander's words, the second round with the North God began. Aetoff was first to attack. She struck at her typical top speed. Alec parried it. As the attacks continued, too fast for Rudius to follow, he parried them without breaking a sweat. From time to time, throwing out counter-strike. There was no breaks between their attacks, but that was because Rudius couldn't keep up. Alec countered, but every attack was stopped by Rizard. Rizard had become Aetoff's shadow. No matter what missteps she made, so long as Rizard was there, she had no weaknesses. Except for how Alec sometimes ignored gravity. Just when you thought that you had him off balance, he'd make some bizarre contortion, leading straight into an unpredictable move. Immediately after doing a big acrobatic maneuver to evade, he'd suddenly plummet down to attack the ground and be back on the offense. Even Rizard couldn't keep up with moves like that. Those were the ones that Sander blocked. He was more familiar than anyone with gravity manipulation. Sander would target the point Alec would hit the ground, or when he was in mid-air. Alec would dodge the attack itself, but he couldn't move the way that he wanted to. By burning energy on simple mischief, he ended up taking more hits. If he tried to get range, Rudius would hit him with magic. He could use his blade to throw off stone cannons, but using stun absorption a split second beforehand, Rudius could delay his reaction and get reliable grazing shots. While not direct hit, a dense barrage would slow him down and keep him from getting too much distance from Aetoff. Alexander had deflected his electric, but Rudius wouldn't give him time to catch his breath. Thus, he wouldn't have the time to use his ultimate weapon from earlier. Alexander was faster and stronger than anyone else here. Maybe because he was in a hurry, maybe because he was panicking, he was sloppy. Every move he made was starting to show roughness around the edges. Their team, on the other hand, was sure and steady and doing reliable damage. There was no reason to do anything reckless. Besides, it's not like there was one big move that would definitively take him down. Again, really cool setup they got here going on. Again, it's basically Aetoff is the front person and putting on the pressure. And then every time he comes in with a counter, Rizard comes in, blocks it. Aetoff attacks. Counter comes in, Rizard blocks it. And then he does some crazy stuff with the gravity magic, and that's what Sander comes in. Because Sander's familiar with the weird gravity-defying crap that he's doing, and he's getting in there and he's hitting him mid-air or hitting him as he comes down for a strike. A great little setup here, and then yes, whenever he does give some distance, Rudius is over there going, storm absorption, pew. Pretty cool little layout here. But again, a surefire sign of how strong Sander was because he was taking on this solo. Now, yes, Alexander, by all indication, has stepped up his strength. He's stepping it up. He's not holding back anymore, and thus, it's going to take a lot more to take him down, but still. If they kept fighting the way they were, eventually he'd come apart. Both endurance and magic became depleted the longer they used them. Who'd pushed themselves the hardest since the fight began? Who had the least left in the tank beforehand? As the fight went on, those things would become clearer. Unfortunately, not going to go for your direction, Rudius. Aetoff took a blow across the face, only a scratch. But as time went on, those scratches mounted. Was she running on fumes? No, that was a definitive weak point. Sander. Sander was their weak point. It made sense. Alexander had hit him with the ultimate attack, after which he protected Aetoff and Rizard, then got another beating before they showed up. It was obvious the vigor had gone out of his movements. He was still moving, still doing his job, probably keeping up because Alexander was being sloppy. He was human after all. Humans had limits. Part human. But yes, good point. Dude took one of those ultimate attacks, came back there, said, hey, Rudius, can you give me a little quick kill? All right, I'm going back at it. He's been at it this entire time. It was a grueling fight. Everyone was getting out of breath. With every attack and counter, they walked on a razor's edge. Another 10 minutes might see Sander reach his limit. Thankfully, this time, they had power to spare. Magic Armor version 1. Rudius's light of sight was elevated. Light of sight was your light of sight was elevated. Yep. Damn it, 7Cs moment right here. Yep, my light of sight. Light of sight Rudeus has got some light of sight. His light of sight is brighter. But no, this is what I was talking about earlier, is that, yes, technically right here, he's indicating that with his magic armor version 1, he's got a elevated light of sight. I thought it meant that it was a broader light of sight, but it's elevated. So he's able to see things a lot better up here. And expanding the area he could support. If Sander went down, he'd shift to support him. Rudeus timed it to his pattern of attack, weaving earth lance directly below and vacuum wave from above. He also upped the frequency of stun absorption. Alexander could ignore gravity to move 3 dimensions, but only because he had the King Dragon blade. The stone worked on the blade. By using it more, Rudeus would be supporting less, but Alex's range would be limited. That would take about a third of the load off Sander. A big chunk, but only a third. It wasn't enough to get his strength back and end the fight. Victory was still a long ways off. Rudeus had to think harder. Very interesting here that, yes, by kind of focusing on using the stone of absorption, which again, it kind of implied the idea that you have to feed it mana. It's not just drawing the stuff, it's creating a way of almost deleting another spell, sort of causing a counter effect there. And so it does make sense that he's going to have to supply a lot to the stone in order to do it. But it is more interesting, the idea that the stone itself works. Now, the stone itself actually works on this blade, the strongest blade out there. Maybe continuously use the stone. They lose long-range attacks, but he can close in with version 1. He scratched that. Edis, Rygerd, and Sander were confronting at point-blank range. There was no room for massive magic armor. He's like, I finally got my magic armor. Time to go. Let's do this. Again, just standing there. Pew, pew, pew. He could just easily trip up his allies. He could buy time, give Sander a chance to retreat and recover. It would only take a few minutes tops. Still, Alexander was still a North God. Without gravity control, he was still skilled in a fight. Right here, it's indicating that it's not just that blade, that this dude is strong. Again, he's supposed to be North God. The assumption is that he's got the skills to back it up, and it's not just the blade that puts him in that position. Even by shutting it down, Rudeus was still lower skilled than Sander in close combat. Even with the Demon Eye, he couldn't follow Alex's moves. It would be a massive burden on Rygerd and Edis. They were already starting to take minor wounds. The difference of a fingertip, a hair's breadth, could lead to a severed artery. Edis was fighting at full pelt. Since early, she had been attacking without pause, and yet every strike went wide. Alec was just that good. It was possible Edis was tired from her fight with the Sword God, or that Alex's ultimate attack earlier had injured her somewhere, but Edis was giving her best performance of her life. Still, Rudeus didn't know how long she'd keep it up. Rygerd had only just recovered from the plague. He'd been bedridden until only a few days earlier. His form was good, but it was possible he'd suddenly collapse. Yeah, dude just got back on his feet. As Rudeus struggled to decide what he'd do, Alexander shifted targets from Edis to Sander, because he wasn't blocking Edis's blows as much. Cuts stripped across Alexander's body. Still, none was a decisive blow. Rudeus could see what he was after. He'd picked up on it too. If he took out Sander, that would break the balance. A chill ran down Rudeus' spine. Sander would die. Then Edis, then Rygerd, then himself. He needed to win this quick. Panic flooded him, which he couldn't afford right now. Anxiety made him doubt his actions and misjudge things. He started making little errors. Rygerd managed to cover for him all the same, but that made him a burden. This wasn't working. He needed something, a decisive play. Right as he thought that, it happened. A decisive blow came, but not for him. That's my statement. Not for him. Right out of the depths of the forest, first, a lump of gray armor came hurling out and rolled like a ball, before crashing into a tree and stopping. The hunk of iron soon moved. Its helmet was askewed, its heavy armor dented. Blood ran out from its head and poured unceasingly from its nose, its face dazed. Still, it kept holding its weapon, scrunched up, its simple and honest face. With all of its might, it glared at the opponent that had thrown it. It was Doga. Best boy Doga. Uh-huh. I can see this. The next one came hurling along with a slim figure. He'd already lost his armor and was naked from the waist up. Zenoba can't keep his damn clothes on. Zenoba, keep your damn clothes on. His scrawny frame looked like it might come into pieces the way that he came hurling by. He crashed into Doga. It was Zenoba. Master. Master. Then came the decisive blow. It had red skin and long fangs and was close to 3 meters tall, a mountain of muscles that dropped down from above like a monkey. It was Ogre God Marta. The second Rudeus saw him, His whole body froze, and a shudder ran through him. Disordered thoughts whizzed through his skull. They were in a delicate balance. Why were they here? Could they win? Were they doomed? Should they fall back or attack? Hey there, Ogre God. Alexander was thrilled with the turn of luck. That's kind of a sign right there that he's excited to see the Ogre God. Like, thank God. Upon seeing the Ogre God, a beaming smile spread across his face. It made Rudius think that Alexander was panicking just like he had. That's right, they weren't the only ones struggling. The delicate balance meant that he had been struggling himself. He couldn't break through. He wanted to use his ultimate attack, but he couldn't. Dragging on in those conditions would take a mental toll even on him. Very interesting. And again, that makes sense because they weren't taking him down, but he wasn't taking them down too. The assumption there is that you were balanced. You had a balance that was going. It's not like he's like, man, I just want to keep this fight going as long as I can. This is really fun. No, he couldn't win. He wasn't winning. Great timing. The Ogre God looked grumpy. Grumpy, like he was wondering what the hell they were doing there. This was bad. This was a delicate situation. Now the enemy had increased. Might help me out? The Ogre God nodded. It's like a moment. They no longer had any power to spare. Rudius had his support against 2 targets now, so he was constantly running around the battlefield. He managed to heal Doga and Zenoba. Both of them were losing against the Ogre God. He moved with unbelievable speed from his huge frame. Every attack sent one of them flying. Zenoba ripped up a nearby tree and threw it at him, but the Ogre God came back and tossed him away like it hadn't done anything to him. Doga attacked with his giant axe, but he might as well have been a mosquito. The Ogre God replied with a punch that sent him sailing into the air. Doga and Zenoba weren't powerless, and yet the Ogre God brushed them off like dust. His power was overwhelming. Which is really funny how this all just kind of concludes. It's just like, it is so funny how this, knowing where this is going, is so funny. Alexander kept up his attack without change. Sander was eking out the very last of his strength to keep going, but Rijerd was also getting tired. He was pushing himself too hard. This was bad, real bad. They weren't looking for a way to break the deadlock anymore. In a few minutes, their line was going to collapse. They had to retreat, but with no line behind them, they'd end up taking the fight to Orsted. Orsted wouldn't die, of course. He could swat them like bugs, but that meant they lost. Bruce wasn't sure if he was okay with that. Again, that's the sucky thing. It's like, yeah, you can just let him go there and it'd be fine, but then the end game is lost. It is so funny to almost have a way out of this situation right here where everybody survives, but you kind of screw us over for later on. He wondered if there was a way to improve the situation. He had to stop one of them at least. If he used every trick he had to be able to fight back. After losing almost all of his scrolls, he managed to get version 1 back. He had his Gatling gun, speed, power. He had to have something. Sander finally fell to his knees, and Rudius stared at the Ogre God in despair. They were doomed if they couldn't stop the Ogre God here. He needed just one more idea. They had a small and precarious advantage, but now they were being pushed to a disadvantage. It could still be turned around if something could be done about the Ogre God. Zenoba and Doga could change out with Sander. Yeah, I think at this point, before everything kind of goes really great, I love this next part. Before it got to this point, my mindset was, okay, Rudius, why don't you have Doga and Zenoba, why don't you switch out with them? Take on the Ogre God himself and have them go. Yes, probably going to get wrecked. I mean, it's all signs seem to point that this Ogre God is insanely powerful. But I would assume that Rudius, with his armor, could at least offset Zenoba and Doga fighting the Ogre God. If Zenoba and Doga are handling the Ogre God while getting their butt kicked, at least handling them, Rudius in version 1 should be able to offset that. He should be able to stand their place, and then they can go handle him, and then everybody can come handle the Ogre God together. That was weird, because Rudius kind of just stays in support mode, which is, I don't know, it seems like Rudius' decision to stay out of the fight so much, it made sense with, Sander and Edis and Rijerd, because they're very melee-based, whereas Doga and Zenoba are also melee-based, but they're also getting thrown around like ragdolls. Rudius could easily step in there at some point and take his place. I think Rudius' choice to kind of sit off the side and be nothing but support seems kind of dumb at this point. But again, he's kind of panicking. It seems a point that he's kind of freezing up right here. Not really doing much besides kind of going, we're in a bad spot. This is bad. Something needs to change. This is bad. But yes, A voice echoed around them, and Rudius' shoulder grew hot. Both Alec and Sanders' heads shot up, and they looked around like they recognized the voice.
Things are getting pretty interesting here, huh?
A second later, something black leapt from the undergrowth. The figure, clad in black armor, holding a sword in one hand, faced the Ogre God head on.
Ah!
They swung at the Ogre God. There was an incredible noise. Somewhere between a clang and a crack, the sword broke. Blood gushed from the arm of the Ogre God, used to guard, and he tottered back a few steps.
Ha!
The black figure didn't pay attention to the broken sword. They closed in and threw a straight, sharp punch into the ogre's gut. The Ogre God doubled over for a second, and the figure threw a left hook. His head snapped around, and he stumbled, but he didn't fall. Raising his uninjured arm, he punched the black figure, sending them flying a few meters back before wings spread midair, and they landed lightly on the ground.
Good, good. I like that.
Rudius gulped. Lady Aetoff. It was the immortal Demon King Aetoff. The most feared being on the demon continent was here before them. Hype. 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 I figured again that she was going to show up when the ogres finally got there. Like, all the ogres warriors are going to come in there, and she was going to show up right at the last second. But apparently she handled it already. Why? She looked around at Rudius, and her face contorted into a savage grin.
I smelled you were trouble through my offshoot, so I thought the big fight must be close. I got here as fast as I could. I've got no idea what's going on at all, but I made it in time. The Ogre God and Alec?
Aetoff cackled so hard, you had to wonder what was so funny. A fight! She wants a fight! Her unsettling laughter echoed around the forest and left Alexander stunned. Rudius was puzzled for a moment, then remembered the arm. Apparently, it hadn't accurately conveyed the situation to her. Still, she made it. Aetoff was here. They had all the firepower they needed. They could win this.
I, the immortal Demon King Aetoff, will wipe every last one of you off the face of the earth.
No, she didn't need to take anyone out. Crap. Moore wasn't here. There was no personal guard to rein her in. She was on the loose.
Or that's what I'd like to do.
She faced off against the Ogre God. He was close to twice her size, despite her being a tall woman.
Ogre God Marta.
I'm like to fight you next then. The Ogre God replied in fluent demon tongue. He spoke with a dignified air that didn't match his exterior. That's God tier for you, perhaps. Oh, it's God tier, so that's why he's able to fluently speak demon tongue with a dignified air.
My personal guard has conquered your puny ogre land. Leave here quietly, or I'll slaughter them all.
What? I had to read that like 5 times when I read it the first time. I'm like, what? This is Aetoff talking. Aetoff says, I will wipe all of you off the face of the earth. I like to do that, but Ogre God, my personal guards have conquered your puny ogre island. Leave here quietly, or we'll slaughter them all. This is Aetoff. The assumption that would happen here is Aetoff shows up and says, I'm going to defeat everybody here. And she just goes crazy. Just goes in fight mode and starts fighting anything in front of her. This girl loves to fight. She wants to fight. She doesn't talk. She hates talking. Stop with all these words. Just fight. When are we going to fight? Oh, you brought me drinks? Let's fight for them. No, I brought you drinks so we can get together. No, let's fight. This doesn't sound like her. This does not sound like her. She took his ogre island hostage and said, leave or we'll kill them. She's choosing instead to just beat the Ogre God right here and now, fight him, defeat him, or possibly lose, I don't know. She's choosing instead of fighting to instead manipulate to stop a conflict. What happened? The assumption is that now that she has this pact with Rudius, that she is going to help Rudius. She's going to do everything in her power to help Rudius. Now, let's be perfectly clear. Like Rudius said earlier, Moore's not here to rein her in. it could be that when they got to Ogre Island, Moore put together a plan to keep them hostage and then sent Aetoff to go inform the Ogre God that they have their tribe to stop the Ogre God from being a part of the other side. This could all be Moore's plan. Like, Moore told her, go there and do exactly this, and she did it, in order to fulfill the contract made with Rudius, which is to assist them. Moore says, you are under contract to assist him. You have that agreement. He beat you. You agreed to help him. This is how we help him. We have to get the Ogre God out of the picture. That's the only way I can explain it. Unless something broke in Aetoff's brain to keep her from just wanting bloodshed like she normally does and hates talking, Moore either put something into play or her agreement with Rudius has forced her to do what is necessary to help him with this fight. And the best way to do that is to get the Ogre God out of the picture. Again, when I read these lines, I literally quadruple read it because I'm like, this does not sound like Aetoff. This does not sound like Aetoff. It's a bold move, and it works, and she's a genius for it. And again, I'm probably going to give the credit to Moore because we'll probably find out later on this is all Moore's plan. Really cool. And it does technically, yes, prove that upon arriving on the way here, she ran into the gathered army and got rid of them right off the bat. Which technically does make sense to Body Gotti. I think when they mentioned that Body Gotti got there, it was the Ogre God that gave him trouble. The Ogre God beat the living fire out of him over and over again until he settled down with them, started drinking, being merry, and Body Gotti was training them. So all indications kind of prove that the tribe isn't full of like insanely powerful warriors because, yeah, Aetoff came in there and her men just wiped the floor with them. Not to say that her men are weak, but they're not like Aetoff levels. But crazy. Very, very crazy set of lines here. The Ogre God stared at Aetoff in shock. He was trying to work out the truth. While she could be lying, there was one thing Rudius knew. There was no way Aetoff was smart enough to lie. Again, I'm surprised that she put this together and she's even agreeing to do this, which again makes me believe this is more.
Me? I'm happy to kill them all. In fact, I like that way best. Yes, killing them all is best. Now fight me.
Again, she wants to fight. Moore put this together. No doubt Moore put this together. Aetoff spread her arms wide and stood ready to fight. Maybe the Ogre God got the sense from her posture that Aetoff was for real. His next move was dramatic. He seemed to coil. Then he leapt like a monkey into a tree. He looked down from above. Hey, Mr. Ogre God? The Ogre God looked at Alec for the first time, like he couldn't care less.
Me, go home. Island in trouble.
He spoke human tongue with a strong accent, like he'd only just learned it. Still, he was bilingual, something Aetoff wasn't able to do at all. She could speak demon tongue, but she couldn't listen in any language. She wasn't bilingual. She only knows demon tongue. And even though she knows demon tongue, she can't understand demon tongue because she won't listen. She can't even listen to demon tongue. Any jab he can get at Aetoff, he'll take. With that, the Ogre God jumped away from tree to tree and disappeared. Alexander watched him go, stunned. He wasn't the only one. Rizard, Sander, and Rudius all stared after him, wide-eyed. Then there was one. Alexander, all alone, left surrounded. Right, our enemy is alone. Grandmother! Again, super shocked how this concluded. This goes credit to Refugin. Similar to the previous chapters, the idea of like Galfalion's fight was very simple technically. I mean, not simple in technique because it was a sort of light. It was a deflection strike. It was, Rizard stepping in for that counter. It was Edis going in for that final strike. It was razor thin, razor edge moment there. Either side could have died in an instant. But the fight itself was about Galfalion. Here, it's not so much of getting like in-depth search into these characters because we technically already did that, or we're probably going to even get some more here soon. We technically got a little bit into that with the idea of the heroism and all that kind of stuff. What makes a hero? And yes, technically the Kalmans and this legacy of the North God style. But I like how this is not resolved by Aetoff shows up and then they get in this big massive brawl. Yes, a lot of this was a fight between like this group right here with Sander, Edis, and Alexander, Rudius on the side, constantly trying to look for an opening. But it's all resolved by saying, I got your people hostage. I don't normally do this, but I got your people over here hostage. Get out of here. Ogre God just like, I care about my people. I'm getting out of here. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the story that we've set up with the Ogre God. That this ogre tribe went through some hell back in the day, and there seems to be this appreciation for life that was bestowed upon them by the actions of this prince. And it seems like he really does care for his people. And yes, they would probably assume that a lot of that has to do with like the choice not even to get involved in the war to begin with. This idea these people don't want to be in fights. And it was probably just through that manipulation that somebody did. Either Bodygotti talked him into it, or the man god's got something on him. Hopefully we'll get into it. But he cares for his people. He's not going to abandon them. This is a sign right here that whatever was to manipulate him to come here isn't worth it. Like, we've had way too many times up to this point where somebody's manipulated by either proxy or directly by the man god to do something that will lead to something horrific happening to their people. This is the one case where the Ogre God's like, nope. Whatever it is isn't enough. Is it to help Bodygotti, my bro that we drank with, that trained my people and we had fun with? Not enough. Is it because the man god saved my life sometime in the past and I feel like I owe it to him to help him? Don't care. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Like, it's a rare case where somebody's like, noping out. I don't care. Everybody else that's in this conflict with the man god and used by the man god always go to their death. Vita goes to death. Geese goes to the death of his people. Rudius almost to the death of Roxy and his family. Alexander, it's for the glory. I have a chance. I'm going to go to my death in order to gain this thing. It is very refreshing. And again, very unique way of having a battlefield like this kind of resolve versus your typical fighting. I mean, massive credits to the writing in this. His dad was his enemy. Grandma couldn't be reasoned with. You couldn't help feel sorry for him in the situation. Standing there dumbfounded. He looked lost. There was one person here who wasn't sensitive enough to pick up on that sort of thing. Edda saw an opening and struck Alec with all of her strength. She's like, let's go. Well, I don't care what this family reunion, he's dead. And I mean a good choice. Because as we see, he's not going to give up. Alec guarded, but he didn't evade or deflect. He tried to guard. He tried to guard against the Sword God Style's ultimate attack, Sword of Light. One that was impossible to guard against. His left hand was sent flying, spraying up blood. The arm hit the ground with a thud. That became the sign of the fight to recommence, the decisive move. There was hardly any structure to the fight as it started again. If Alexander had both arms, he might be able to turn this around. But alas, the hand holding his cards was cut off. Without it, this conflict wouldn't even be a fight anymore. And it wasn't. It only took 5 minutes. Alec, covered in wounds, went running pathetically away. It wasn't a tactical retreat. With fear and ragged breathing, he fled as if from death itself. This was the North God. You wouldn't believe he was one of the 7 great powers. His flight was pathetic and frantic. After fleeing pathetically for an hour, Alexander was forced to a ravine. Zenoba and Doga collapsed the moment he took off. So only Sander, Aetoff, Edis, Rijerd, and Rudius had him pinned. They were at the point where the gap stretched 300 meters, so it wasn't one you could jump. Damn it! He was backed into a corner. Or was it an act? Alexander came to a stop on the edge, breathing heavily. He looked like he was at his limit, but they couldn't let their guard down. He'd lost one arm, but he started off wielding the King Dragon blade with one hand. Alexander's face looked frozen by fear. Still, he was the North God, so Rudius couldn't let his guard down. Come now, give it up. You can't do it. You can't get out of this.
That's right. Now accept your death quietly.
Mother, I'm talking to Alec right now, so be quiet for a minute, okay?
Oh.
God damn this family, dude. What? This fucking family, dude. I swear to God, this family. Come on, boy. Son, give it up. You can't get out of this. Just give up.
That's right. Let's kill him.
Mom, stop. I want to save my son.
Oh, whatever.
So fucking great. Oh, gosh. Aetoff shut up at the word from Sander. Aetoff did what he said. Watching them, Rudius was reminded again that they were family, even if there was zero resemblance. It's like, yeah, finally somebody that could actually tell her to stop. And I wonder if that's because he looks like Kalman the First. I wonder if that's because he looks like Kalman the First, or if it's just that she cares for him a lot, at least him, because he's a direct son of hers. When you got your arm cut off after keeping your power in reserve to fight Orsted, you lost. I told you long ago to never, ever underestimate your opponent. He was defeated. He held back, and that was the mistake he couldn't recover from. It happens a lot, especially when you underestimate someone. Throw down your sword and surrender yourself. As your father, I will see you don't come to harm. Kind words from Sander. As your father. These past few years, Rudius had gotten weak to those words. Still, Rudius couldn't let it slide. This guy had attempted to slaughter all the Superb. He wasn't a direct disciple to the man god, more like a disciple of Geese's. And it was only an attempted slaughter. If Alec gave a tearful apology, Rudius could possibly... He looked young. Just like Paul had been young. Rudius didn't know his actual age. But he had to be far younger than Paul when Rudius was born. You could even call him a child. Maybe if he applied himself to learn to be better. But then it hit Rudius. Was a child like that going to quietly listen to someone talking down to him? Yeah, I like the first bit of this whole thing that yes, the words "as your father" technically hits a little different for Rudius now. This is a guy that has said that statement probably many times to his children. As your father, I will protect you. As your father, I will always, be there for you. These are words that Rudius at this point should be used to saying himself. He's connecting to Sander quite well right here. But yeah, I like the fact that he can't really get around the fact that, yeah, this guy wants to kill the Superb. He probably is going to eventually. He now knows where the Superb are, even if this whole fight with the man god goes away. Even if he gives up on killing Orsted, he's probably still going to want to come back here to kill the Superb so that he can look like a hero. Can you really forgive this dude? Do you think he's ever going to stop? Question mark. Yeah, there's a massive oof here in the idea that you don't really want to wrong Sander, and it seems like Aetoff doesn't give a rip. You don't want to wrong Sander by killing his son. This is the struggle right here. But no, it's odd that he says right here, Alexander isn't a direct disciple to the man god. More like a disciple of Geese's. When did we establish that he's not a disciple of the man god? Has Rudius confirmed at this point from his perspective who all is confirmed a disciple of the man god? Yes, technically he's working for Geese, but from the reader's perspective, we have confirmed that yes, he has talked to the man god before. I believe he said something about having a dream a long time ago. No, I think from the reader's perspective, I think in that chapter, we pretty much got no indication that the man god directly spoke to him. It was really the fact that Geese came there and said, I know where this is at. I know somebody. I don't recall. I know that Galfalion had a dream with the man god before. So yes, we know that he's not directly connected, but how does Rudius know that? That's the odd thing there. I won't. Yeah, thought not. I didn't even fight with my full strength. The thing with my left hand was just luck. If the Ogre God hadn't run, this would have never happened. That's why you lost. What? So I shouldn't rely on my allies? You're one to talk. Fighting in a group like that. A hero doesn't blame his allies. Your allies will aid you in your time of need. But even if you should lose their aid along the way, you win anyways. I like this. It's like all this fighting and now he's finally like, you ganged up on me. He's like totally throwing a tantrum right here. It's like it's so in stark contrast to what Galfalion was all about. Like, who else is coming at me? Come at me. Again, to the whole idea of Aetoff. Bring everything you got. Bring an army. I don't care. They're your people. They're your strength. Bring it all. And even with Alexander, he didn't make any complaints. It wasn't until he's losing that he's now throwing a tantrum. You put a bunch of people. If I had Ogre God, we would have won. He's such a kid. So he's such the teenage MC character. Sander made it a strangely persuasive argument. Perhaps because his tone, Rudius wasn't up on the details of the kind of heroic legend he'd made for himself. But clearly, this man was a legend. Which is so funny that he's so geeky about every other legend. It's kind of funny. That wasn't the only reason you lost. Your strategy was flawed. You should have fought us with your full power, and then retreated temporarily to fight again once you've recovered. As if the chances to fight Orsted just shows up every day. Who told you that? Alex was struck silent, with a look that said Sander was right on the mark. It had to be Geese. The man-god couldn't see Orsted, and Orsted had been widely believed to be missing for a long time. Ruius only knew where he was because of his situation. Maybe it was inevitable Alec would think that he could find him here, that this was his only chance to fight him. He was still young. His claims to want to be a hero, and his desire to surpass his father, that probably stemmed from his youth too. Again, right here, he's kind of confirming that aspect, that somebody told him it had to be Geese. So this is where it finally kind of makes that connection. It had to be Geese. I mean, the assumption. He could still be a disciple, but Geese led him here. There was no next time. He had to grab every chance that came before him. Of course, he'd think that. He was a bit too aggressive with it, but Ruius understood the mindset. You ought to have found some like-minded friends, or rivals, your own age. Shut up. Alex seemed disgusted with Sander's pity. He raised his sword. Edis and the others raised their own. Ruius readied his spells. 5 against 1. There was no hope he can win, yet. No, I haven't lost, not yet. Now's when a hero turns the battle around. I'll take you all down. Kill all the Superb. Then Orsted. I'll kill the Dragon God and become a hero. He's such a f***ing MC. The f***ing MC right here. Chill down, Kirito. You don't even have a Kirito jacket. Don't act like you did, tough. Arm, absorb. Gravity distorted, but only briefly. For a moment, Ruius felt weightlessness, like an elevator starting to move, but then found himself sucked back to the ground. Rah! Alex swung his sword down at the ground. He struck the earth with the great blade and broke it. An eruption of dust filled Ruius' vision for a second. Would he be attacking from the smokescreen? Ruius braced himself. Then with the eye of distant sight, he caught a gap in the dust. Alexander was falling backwards into the ravine. Self-KO? Did he push himself in the ravine with his own attack? That wasn't it. There was a smile on Alex's face. A nasty smile. A victorious smile. Right. He had fallen off the bridge before. He'd be back. The King Dragon Blade's power was gravity manipulation. Even if he fell all the way down to the bottom, he'd have no trouble getting back up. The next second, Ruius jumped in after Alec into the ravine. And that is chapter 6. My gosh. My gosh. Like I was kind of getting to earlier, I wasn't a massive fan of the beginning segment of this chapter because it does feel like a lot of just kind of exchanging blows, you know, just constantly trying to choose what he wants to do, panicking about the situation, trying to find an opening. But my gosh, I like the later part of this. I like the later part of this. So I'm like super big on like the previous chapter with all the stuff about the North God, the Kalman I basically, and how that's kind of, you know, set off to each generation of them. And the North God style, all that kind of look into like the eccentrics and whatnot, and how the eccentrics were created, and the idea this was a new concept that he was trying to instill upon the North God style people, and it's something that seemingly Kalman III didn't like, and so there is kind of almost this desire for him to show in strength and brute strength once again with the sword. But yeah, this later part I really do love. Again, a lot of it is like the just how Aetoff's acting is like, what happened to this girl? This is weird. And yes, it does kind of have me interested to see how this is going to wrap up. Obviously, we're going to wrap it up here. But I don't know. I honestly am kind of puzzled. Again, we still have Bodygotti. Bodygotti is the last piece. We've handled the Ogre God. The Ogre tribe is not even in the picture. The assumption is that the Superbs and Ruius' attack has handled all the hunting party. So we're down to literally at this point, just Alexander. Galfalion's dead. Alexander. Geese. Bodygotti. Geese isn't going to do anything. He could slip into the back there and do something diabolical, but it's just down to Alexander and Bodygotti. Ruius is going in after Alexander, and I'm gonna assume Aetoff's going with them. I mean, Edis too is probably going to jump, but I think Roger would probably stop her from jumping because it's going to, girl, you're going to hurt yourself. The only reason that Ruius made the fall was because he had the box. Alexander's going to be fine jumping down there because he's got the blade. Edis can't jump down there without breaking her legs or something, unless she's going to jump off the walls. I've never seen an indication that she's that skilled in doing, you know, rock climbing. I'm going to guess that Edis is probably going to jump after, but then Roger's going to stop her. But I think that Aetoff might join them and flying down there. She could grab somebody and go down there with them. She might grab Sander and drag him down there. But I know what I assume is going to play out is that they all stay up there and Rudeus goes down there and fights him alone, which is, again, kind of weird. You would assume that Aetoff would be like, all right, I'm going too. Like, Aetoff's not going to stay outside and go, well, Rudeus, I guess, is going to handle it. No, they're going to jump down there with him. But I'm going to assume it's probably just going to be Rudeus for some reason. He's going to go down there in solo, which I don't really see being too much of a challenge at this point. I know that Rudeus is going to expend a lot of freaking mana in order to beat him, even one armed, because at this point he just beat up and he's one armed, but he still has, again, the world's strongest blade in his hand, so it's going to be a tough fight. My assumption is that when Rudeus is fighting him down there, I think this is going to be when Bodyguardi finally shows up, which at that point really does suck because everybody needs to rest at this point. Like, there is a necessity for some people to get some sleep, recover themselves, get healing and whatnot. So it would suck if Bodyguy does show up right now, and it would probably turn into Orsted having to hold him off until Rudeus gets done and comes back up there. Now, the question mark is, what is Roxy doing? I'm actually surprised at this point that Sylphie hasn't showed up yet. That is another oddity there. And that could be what Roxy's doing. My assumption is because when Rudeus got there and the armor was there, Roxy was gone. He's like, that means that everything is going to plan. My assumption is that what Roxy did was when she created the teleportation circle to bring the armor in, she chose to swap places. Because they mentioned that before, I think, was this idea of like swapping places with the teleportation or whatever. She probably used that circle to swap places with the armor itself, and she went to the location where the armor was, and from there, she makes sure that the family is safe, checks in with everybody, and she probably at that point confronted Sylphie, who's probably there protecting the family, probably staying on guard. She probably really quickly learned that the office was under attack, so she's probably staying there to guard the family, knowing full well that's probably what everybody would want her to do. And so she's probably there with Isolde and Ghislaine, and Roxy's going to come there and go, okay, this is going down over here. We need to get you over there. And it could probably turn to the idea that, yeah, they then from that point transport to the Superb Village while everybody's over here with Alexander, and then possibly Bodyguardi shows up, and you have Isolde, Ghislaine, Sylphie, and Roxy all having to hold off Bodyguardi until Rudeus and them get done, and then come in and join in. That's kind of where I'm assuming it's going to go. I mean, it could come down to the idea that Rudeus beats Alexander, and everybody's like, celebrate. We did it. We beat Geese. And there might be a little bit of an inkling in the back of his mind, like, oh, that's right, but there's still Bodyguardi. I think the comments that were made by Kishidika should cement somewhere in Rudeus's mind that there is still a possibility that the Bodyguardi is going to be a thing. Like, that Bodyguardi is still going to end up being a threat at some point. But I don't know. I'm curious how long this fight with Alexander is going to last. I sadly don't see Alexander stopping at this point. That's the sad thing. Is like, I for Sanders' sake, I don't want Alexander to die, but I don't think he's going to stop. If at this point, so many times is Sander trying to drill it in his head, there's nothing Rudeus can tell him that's going to stop him. I kind of wonder if it's possible that Aetoff could smack some sense into him. Not that she's going to give him any kind of correcting words, but simply her going down there, beating his ass in the ground and saying, shape the up, boy. Like, stop. I don't know. Maybe she could have insights in Kalman I that she can pass on to him to tell him, you're nowhere near him. You're pathetic. I'll be curious. I unfortunately, I don't see this ending with Alexander living. I think Rudeus is going to have to finish him off. I just don't think he's going to stop. And again, this is somebody that is willing to kill the Superbs even after seeing that they're not enemies. I don't care. People see them as that, so I got to kill them. Anyways, we'll see. But that was a good set of chapters. Again, hype for the next chapter. We'll see where it goes from here. I haven't even seen the title for the next chapter. I haven't even seen the title for the next chapter. Let me assume. Andrew, what do you think title for next chapter will be? Rudeus versus North God Kalman III. Magic Armor Rudeus versus Kalman III. We'll see. It's going to be a simple something versus something. But anyhow, that's it for this Mushoku Monday. I need to stop blabbing on. Hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday as always. Thank you guys so much for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys had fun. A lot of fun every single week with the chat. Had a lot of fun conversations last week especially. So hopefully some more fun discussion this week regarding this particular set of chapters. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday. Thank you guys so much for your support, your kind words. Thank you. And yes, especially appreciate everybody that supports channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that good stuff. But until next time, until the next Mushoku Monday, y'all take care. He wasn't a direct disciple of the man. Especially when you underestimate. Someone. Testing. Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Trek Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. Of course, being the North God Warrior, he couldn't just easily pretend to wait. He could just easily have pretended to wait for a surprise attack. He could just as easily pretend to wait in order to launch a surprise attack. He put a stop to the bouncy physics. He put a stop to the bouncy physics defying aerial maneuvers to get into a more. But he taught that one not rely on only the sword. This sentence is dude. That one need not rely only on the sword. There you go. Have it.